Ethical and healthy dominance is where you're lifting the self-esteem of the submissive. So it's about her experience first. I know that kind of sounds like a lonely place to be as a dom, but once that happens, she rewards you in ways that you can't even comprehend until you get there.
Like you first to introduce yourself and tell the crew a bit about who you are and what your experience is, because all they know is that I just kind of talk you up every time I mention you and say this guy's crazy.
Oh, nice.
And just you wait. So I've been leading it to you. So yeah, give us an intro. Who the hell are you?
So hello everyone. I am Sir Dominic, aka Dominic Sloan, aka the sexuality coach for the Naturals. I've been a professional dom now for over 7 years, a men's coach for at least double that. I've been fascinated with sexuality my whole life, starting from about 17 when I went to my first kink party. So I've been on an odyssey, obviously very obsessed with kink, but also weaved in tantra, sex magic, sex healing. So there's a whole bunch of sexuality kind of disciplines revolving in my brain. So that's the short version. So I've been working for one of Australia's top BDSM houses, and I work with couples. I work primarily with women, do the coaching, do the whole thing.
Can you, because when you say, I work with couples and I work in a dungeon, most guys have no idea what that means. Like, so could you talk us through like, how does it work if a lady wants to, use your services? How would that usually go down? And kind of talk us through a little bit about what a session might look like.
Yeah, so they hit my website, they get a bit of an understanding of what's on offer. There's a list of services, and they reach out to me and they basically discuss what they're looking for. Some are married, some are not. There's a whole range of different reasons why they would come to see me. But primarily they're looking for a one-on-one experience with someone that's safe and that they can trust the experience. So it's everything except full-blown sex. So I don't work as an escort, even though I am a sex worker. I don't have sex with them. I do everything except that. So, kinks, spanking, flogging, whatever that whatever their desires are, I basically shape an experience for them, usually about a minimum of an hour, usually between 2 to 3 hours. So they're coming to me to experience kink in a professional setting in a dungeon. So what does a dungeon mean? So a dungeon means just a space that's set up exactly for that experience. So it's full of specific equipment like spanking benches. There's a whole bunch of, I could list equipment for the next 2 hours, but I won't. So it's all set up and it's themed for that experience. So it's quite a special experience for them because a lot of them, I'd say about 60%, it's their first ever time. So I'd say the vast majority of my role is introducing women and couples. That's a different thing, but introducing people to kink has been pretty much the mainstay of what I do.
And like when you say you work mostly with women that haven't had experiences before, how are they getting this in their head in the first place? Like if they're taking the jump from they've got an idea right through to going into a dungeon with a stranger. What's going on, I guess, psychologically, or what's leading women to kind of reach out to you, do you think?
Well, there's a bunch of different reasons. It's like, as we'll probably get into, kink and the whole, rough sex experience, it's very biologically and instinctually driven. So that usually they've had this deep yearning for as long as they can remember, and they've never had an outlet. So that's one camp of women. The other women, they've either got partners and their partners are not into it. So they're looking for an experience where they're guaranteed that the person that they're having an experience with isn't going to mess up their personal lives. So that's another reason. That's another camp. So
right. So as in, you mean a woman is with or without her partner knowledge going to you because it's emotionally safe in the sense you're not going to get involved in their relationship and cause drama. I mean, like that.
Well, that's one of the main concerns. Obviously, the other is, hygiene, safety, Someone that they can trust, someone, who's accountable. Like, it's not just that they've met me on Tinder and they'll never see me again. They can find me. So they feel quite safe in that regard, because I've got like 64 pages of content on my website. It's not just something that a guy has set up as a ruse to, get free bloody experiences out of.
Yeah.
So one of the other reasons is they don't want to go with a stranger. They want to have their first experience. They want to be safe. They want to know that that person is experienced. So yeah, that's probably the primary reasons for when I do the one-on-one sessions with women.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the main reasons.
Gentlemen, there's only 3 days left to join the Lifestyle Design Academy, with enrollments closing on the 17th of April. And right now, due to requests, we're offering part payment options and payment in crypto. So if you'd like to join myself and my other elite mentors, such as Sir Dominic, on this 8-month adventure into lifestyle design, social circle building, seduction, BDSM, tantra, inner game, and so much more, click the link below, find out all about it, and we'll see you on the first day of the course, which is next week. So don't waste any time. Back to the video.
I would assume that a lot of people in this chat have either never done any kink, or if they have, they've kind of just dabbled in a bit of spanking and a bit of kind of impromptu kink. Usually, as we've seen when we run the Sex God Masterclass, there's often a lot of initial mental resistance to the whole idea of it at all, because the misconception is often that this is abusive, or that like what is the point of this in the first place? Like, you remember when we had that client last class who was saying, like, because he'd signed up for this expensive course and he'd come along because he believed that it was useful and he believed us, but his kind of initial question was, why are we doing this? Is this because we do this to the woman and the woman just sort of puts up with it? And like he couldn't get his head around initially that this was for women, that this was beneficial to them. I've certainly heard clients and people that I've talked to about kink in the past, like, think that, okay, is this something that only people who are, touched up by their uncle are into, or people who are really like have just gone so far off the deep end that they just need more and more extreme things because otherwise they can't feel anything anymore. I think there's quite a lot of misconceptions about what is kink and what is the purpose of it in the first place. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Why kink? Why are we even doing this?
I'll start with what I believe my definition of kink is. So for me, it's everything that isn't just straight up penetrative sex or oral sex in a vanilla context that is also interesting. So it's anything from, impact, bondage, role plays. There's a whole myriad of experiences that you can have in a sexual context, which isn't just vanilla sex. So for me, everything else outside of that is kink in some way.
So basically anything that's not like a British man just sort of wedged between the legs of his wife going, yes, think of England, dear. She's like, is this kink? Oh no, this is not kink. Anything else is. I'm done.
If he was wearing a penguin suit, and that was his thing, it probably is, yeah.
That sounds hotter, yeah. Penguin suit.
So the thing that I want to add to the definition of what kink is that this is my classic story. I've been at many dinner parties and people go, what do you do? And I say, do you want the real answer or do you want the fake answer? And everyone's like, of course we want the real answer. And I say, well, I beat women for cash. And they ask me to do these things. And then they go, oh my God. And then everyone has a panic attack. And then I do my little survey of like, who here has ever been spanked before during sex and enjoyed it? And, all the women's hands go up. And then 10 seconds ago. 10 seconds ago, they were dissing it. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely the conception out in the,
mainstream world or whatever.
There's a conception of what kink is and then what it actually is. And it's anything that's interesting. So the vast majority of people have experienced it, even if they don't identify with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure a lot of the guys here, they'll go, I'm not kinky, but then, we'll examine their sex life and they're doing kink virtually 80% of the time.
I think everyone here is certainly kink curious. That's why we have 73 people on here right now. They're all definitely interested. But I guess what I want to kind of dispel is some of the myths around like it being abusive or it being, domineering, like, because
I'll get into that. Definitely. Mm-hmm. So there is definitely a fine line between what's fun and what's abusive. So the first and foremost point is it consensual? And not just consensual, is there informed consent? So informed consent is a concept which did come out of the kink world. Thank you to the kink world, which is kind of bleeding over to the vanilla world. So informed consent means everyone is aware of the risks, what's involved, what are the responsibilities, there's clear communication and everyone's on the same page. So as long as you're doing that, that's a very good start to not be domineering and just being ethically dominant. So that's definitely one start. The second, now this is where it gets a little bit of a gray area, is what's abusive and what's not, especially when you're playing with force and impact and, pretty hard welts.
Violence.
Yeah, well, eroticized aggression. How about that? I don't like the word violence. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the way that I frame it is eroticized aggression, because the dominant is pushing. So there is a fine line. It's very hard to define. It's something that over time I get from a feeling, a felt sense. If I was to write it on paper, it's very hard. So I would say what is abusive when it comes to the bedroom antics is something that obviously is if the woman feels, I'm guessing I'm speaking of guys here. So every time I say the woman, it means the submissive. Obviously, if she's coerced or she's not feeling it and she's doing it out of a place of to keep the man happy, that actually gets along to the side of abusive. And as well as anything that's done with backed by fear or
threats or whatever.
Yeah, threat. That was the word I was looking for. So that's the kind of the clear definition of the difference between dominance and domineering, is using a threat, and the woman is doing it from a place of fear instead of doing it from a place of joy and of giving and receiving. So the pleasure pain concept. Can you talk about this notion of pleasure and pain? I feel like there are things to know there. So as far as my research has concluded, pleasure and pain are just experiences interpreted by the brain. And the pleasure and pain center of the brain are literally cousins. They go along the same pathways of the body. So that's why a lot of people find pain pleasurable. And see, I don't even want to say pain because it's a very strong word. Because when we hear pain as a concept, as a word, we all it's
an unpleasant thing you don't want.
Yeah. So how about we just change it from, instead of pleasure and pain, to pleasure and sensation that isn't automatically interpreted as pleasure by the average person. Now, the thing that you touched on before was endorphins. So when you start to spank someone, or whether it be a girl, you get hit yourself, the skin starts to go red. So that's the body saying there's a trauma here. There's some trauma here. And then that gets interpreted by the brain as being pleasurable. For a masochist, I would love it completely. Or most girls can handle the heavier sensation that isn't, say, straight out painful. So the body then goes, okay, there's something here. We need to send blood there because there's a trauma. So we need to send white blood cells down there. So that's why the skin gets red when you're inflicting pain, inverted commas. And that is also a signal to the brain to send endorphins. So endorphins are the chemicals in the brain which allows us to cope with painful sensations. In an eroticized fashion, pleasure and pain explodes their brains, something shocking. Most, I'd say 95% of girls that I've played with don't take extreme pain. They don't take canes or anything like that. Most will take spanking, and specifically the floggers that I make. They take those quite easily because it's not as pleasurable as, say, having a feather over their skin, but it's a sensation that turns them on. Like it makes them come alive. It sends electricity through their nervous system. There's a whole bunch of different reactions that are going on. Mixing it with the pleasure aspect, because they're so close to each other, it kind of sends like an overload to the brain, and it ends in orgasm, usually. When I do it anyways. So pain, let's not use that word to say sensation. It's exciting. It's definitely bringing them into that point of stillness that you mentioned before, how there is nothing more in that moment except the sensation. So there is kind of like these little mini moments of enlightenment.
Zen moments.
Yeah. They're actually, it is a moment of zen or enlightenment. In that precise moment, they're focused completely there. Their mind is still. There's no monkey brain going on. There's no thoughts about if they've left the fucking iron on or, nothing like that. They're fully in that present moment.
I'm unified with all the inner earth.
If you can skillfully do, transverse the pleasure and pain dichotomy, you will be 1% of the 1%, because the vast majority of men don't know how to do it properly.
The 1% of the 1%. So let's talk about choking, right? So choking is one of the things that a lot of women, many women like. It's all the rage. Everyone's heard about it on the internets now. So it is something that a lot of women want. It is dangerous, of course, because you are squeezing someone's neck and you could theoretically fucking damage or kill them. So, I'm giving disclaimers here that this is not a choking class that I'm doing right now. When we do Sex God Masterclass, we do choking classes where the guys practice on each other first, then we practice on the women. You feel what it's like to be choked yourself. So this is just for educational, this is just for entertainment purposes, what I'm explaining. It's not an official class. So please don't go out and think you know exactly everything from what I've said. But the most important thing, I would say, is that you understand you're never putting pressure on the front of the throat. And you may think you're not, because sometimes when you're squeezing on the sides, you will actually still be applying pressure in the middle of the hand and pushing onto where the Adam's apple is for men. So that's the most important thing, is that there should be zero pressure. In fact, I will keep like a millimeter or two space between the skin of my webbing of my hand and the neck, just to be sure, right? So that's the first thing, because you can crush someone's windpipe and it feels really horrible. I mean, try that. If you press on the front of your throat a bit, it doesn't feel nice at all. So what you're doing is you're actually applying pressure to the blood vessels. The idea is that you're cutting blood to the brain, not oxygen, because when you choke someone correctly, like I'm actually choking myself now, my face will go a bit red as I start to lose blood flow, but I can still breathe, right? So I'm not putting pressure on the windpipe in any way. I'm starting to compress the arteries, and I can't remember what they're called, so someone can tell me, on the sides. So if you see the V shape here, what I'm doing is I'm actually applying a clamp, not gripping with my fingers, because if I do that, that's actually not choking at all. That's grabbing by the neck muscles. And I can do that. I can grab someone by basically the back of the neck here with a clamp, and I can control it like that. That's not a choke. That's me gripping into the muscle. I definitely don't ever want to be gripping in with the fingertips into the windpipe or into the blood vessels either. So what I'm doing is this clamp motion. And I need to be really conscious and really aware when I do this, that I'm putting even pressure on both sides, as opposed to one, which is common if you're not paying attention, is you're putting too much pressure on one side and it's uncomfortable on one side and then not supported on the other. So there is this real sense of like they're both clamping at the same speed. And take it lightly at first. You will be surprised if you become decent at choking, that you'll get things where girls will grab your hand and fucking push it harder than you think you should go, which at first can be pretty scary, because you're like, fuck, she's a delicate thing, I'm going to break her. But if you do it correctly, they can take a good amount of pressure. Some girls will want you to knock them out. I won't go that far. I will take it to the point where I see pink, her face going pink, and her getting a little glazed look in the eyes. That's about where I'm going to take it, because that's where she's starting to get a bit lightheaded from lack of oxygen. But I'm not going to, some girls would prefer if I just kept on going until she passed out. I think that's too dangerous. It's not worth the risk. So I just do it to there, and then I'll hold it and I will only have done that if I've told her to tap me, because a verbal cue might not work, because she might be getting a bit difficult to speak. So I just say, I'm gonna choke you now, or I don't necessarily say I'm going to choke you. I start doing it if I've gotten good responses, and then I say, tap me if it's too much, right? And then I'll apply the pressure where I can feel that I'm compressing the blood vessels, and then I hold it there, and I'm usually fucking her at the same time, or pulling her hair, or using a vibrator maybe, because it intensifies what's going on for a pussy. Like women many times have said that's the easiest way for them to come, is being fucked or having a vibrator whilst being choked, because it gets them out of their head, gets them totally into their body. There's this rush from this slight asphyxiation, and it seems to be awesome for it. So there's some basics. You can do a two-handed one, but the two-handed is even more difficult. But yeah, so there's some basics. Please be careful with this. Please, no pressure on the front. Please use good communication. It can be dangerous.
As a general rule of thumb, try not to do more than 10 to 12, 13 seconds at the most when you're first starting. Like literally count to 10 and stop, irrespective of if this is like your first experiences with it. Stop there, get used to it before you go further in with it. I wouldn't be doing it. Me personally, I don't do it with girls I've just met, especially first session. Maybe first session I'll do something very light and test the reaction more than anything. But it's not something I generally go down too often. I could actually link if you guys want, a link to a diagram, and I can point out the different arteries, what they do and stuff, if you guys want that.
Of course they do. Of course they do. This is a bunch of techie nerds that want to know nerdy stuff. We're all sex nerds.
So you've got 2 points you can do the choke. You've got generally aim for the carotid artery. So because once that artery goes up towards near the jawbone, you'll see that it breaks off into two. So if you're only gripping one and you don't have the other properly, you're not going to get the effect that you're looking for. So go down a bit and you'll see where you're basically trying to get between where it says common carotid artery and the internal carotid artery. You see there's a junction point where they break out. So you're trying to get that one for the maximum effect. But please, guys, don't go more than 10 seconds at the start. Yeah. That's more. And, you'll see a lot of girls go, I want to pass out, and just say, I personally just say, no, I don't do that personally. I get them to a point, when I start to see their eyes go a bit, then I let it go instantly. And then the thing is, you can let it go, count another 10, 20 seconds, and then you can go again. Because you're not cutting it, you're cutting a bit, then allowing, cutting a bit and allowing. So you can do it, quite often if you're not going the full tilt to the point that they're passing out. It can be this thing that you do. Primarily, they enjoy it more when they're orgasming. So you can do it without that. It still feels good. But the idea is to, the most optimal time is around, because essentially it's the same as they start to feel what you feel when you have nitrous oxide or happy gas. You're cutting oxygen to the brain. The brain starts to do its thing and everything starts to become heightened. So check out that diagram, and please no longer than 10 seconds. Really stay safe with this. Out of every single activity, this is the most riskiest one. It can get you in trouble. The other side of it as well, for a safety legal standpoint, is that it can leave bruising around the neck, right? It's very hard to explain bruising.
Yeah, it doesn't that's not a good look, right?
She goes to the cops and says, he tried to choke me. And you say, but she wanted it. They're not going to believe you 99 times out of 100. So be extremely careful with that, yeah? I can't emphasize it enough, because I've seen some horror stories. I've seen when people have died from asphyxiation. And the thing is, what James was saying is absolutely correct. When you're pushing forward, you're actually collapsing the esophagus. If that happens, who knows she can end up dead. You're calling the ambulance straight away. So, it's something to be very, very careful. I can't emphasize it enough.
I think we've done our due diligence now. We now put it out into the universe.
Yeah, okay. Educational purposes. I don't agree with any of it.
Yeah, that was all just theoretical. We've never done it ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about the art of being a dom, what it's really like to be a dominant person? I feel like it's not just slapping and choking. That would make a nice frame for what will be discussed next. So yeah, that's cool. So yeah, what's the felt sense or the experience like, or what are the qualities that make a man dominant as opposed to just the technical things of hitting?
So first and foremost, BDSM, kink, is defined by these two words, power exchange. So I need to define this before we can get to that. So obviously, the people that involve exchange power. The sub gives the dom the power to work within the parameters of what she's okay with. So the dominant, that's where he actually gets the dominant. He gets to move within the parameters or the list of the activities she's open to. And then the dom gives the sub the power to call the shots to a degree. So it is a paradox. So first and foremost, if you're not doing it from a place of this paradox, in my opinion, it's not healthy. That being said, really complicated, intrinsic, very deep DS, which is dominant submissive, or MS, master slave relationships, they can push past this line. But that's generally not the case with 98% of women in the world. So we're not going to be discussing any of that today. So the really intrinsic stuff, we might be able to touch on it as themes, but generally we're sticking into the world of ethical DS. So what's it like to be an ethical dom? You are essentially a giver. You're leading and giving at the same time. So the paradox is that you're surrendering to the limits and the boundaries that the sub dictates. So if you can't handle that, kink is not for you, in my opinion anyways.
Yes, that's an important thing, isn't it? Because I've seen that a little bit when I've gone to a couple of play parties and when I've talked to girls about their experiences with guys who say they're doms, that often it can be that a man is actually overcompensating for his lack of confidence or his insecurities, and so he learns a few kind of techniques and maybe he gets some of the kit and then starts belting women in order to make himself feel powerful. Yes. As opposed to what you're talking about, which, because I know you very well, and I know you're an extremely empathetic person, and I've seen you do atrocious things to women in a consensual space. Dom does demonstrations as part of the Sex God Masterclass here in this house, and also I've been to some play parties where I've seen him work. And it's truly electrifying and terrifying to watch when you're going full tilt in a very good way. It makes you.
Such a compliment.
But then the paradox being that I've seen you work therapeutically with women as well, and just with your friends. You're certainly someone who's a giving person. I think we've talked about this before, that there are certainly types of doms that are more on the sadistic side, that they're they get off on the deliverance of pain and kind of selfishly taking. And there is a place where that can work too, because you can have a masochist who wants that, and that would be a more delicate kind of negotiation. But okay, there are certain dynamics where that can work. But you and I are both. You describe us as tops, right? Or as.
Well, yeah. So I'll describe that. I'll get to that in 1 second. There is one point I forgot to add. Ethical and healthy dominance is where you're lifting the self-esteem of the submissive. So it's about her experience first. I know that kind of sounds like a lonely place to be as a dom, but once that happens, she rewards you in ways that you can't even comprehend until you get there. So as long as you're aiming to make it something healthy, whether you're exploring trust or boundaries or even playing with fear, it doesn't matter. As long as the intent, and it's something that she can feel, not just hear with words, because words are meaningless. As long as if she can actually feel over the course of the experience of playing with her that she's raised, that she's held, within a non-judgmental space, all of the positive, healthy, conscious relating aspects come into this. As long as that is what's at the cornerstone of the experience, and that she's kind of, I know it sounds weird, but left better than when you found her, then that's the cornerstone of ethical dominance in the way I like to play specifically. The people that don't do that, I kind of question them, and I think there's a bit of pathology, as you've just touched on. There's other massive issues going in, whether it be insecurities or just
misogyny, hating on women. Destroy their self-esteem.
There can be there's psychopaths in the world. You put a cane or a flogger in his hand, and a psychopath's happier than a pig in shit. So it's not where I'd like to play.
What's up, gentlemen? that was fucking cool, right? I was working on this video with the editors over the last few days because I'd forgotten what me and Dom had talked about, because I tend to, because so much stuff happens in my life, and I'm watching back going, this is fucking deep, nasty, good shit, if you're into that kind of thing. So, we've only got 3 days left for you guys to join the Lifestyle Design Academy. Enrollments are closing on the 17th of April, and then that's it. After that, I shut the doors, and then I get on to teaching the guys in the course. So, if you'd like to join me, Sir Dominic, 5 other of my elite mentors in all areas related to lifestyle design, seduction, finances, digital nomadism, and so much more, then click the link in the description, find out all about the LDA, and sign up today, because it is fucking incredible, and I'm very excited to start teaching it next week. All right. Now, I'm going to go to the airport and pick up my mum, who's just arrived from Australia, who hasn't been here for a couple of years, and I'm very excited to take her for a little walk around the farm. All right, peace!